And Neil, it's great to see you. It looks like you got your cowbell ready for us already coming up on Saturday, but we look forward to being there. How's everything going?
Been good, Roger. Good to talk to you.
Well, we're certainly excited for what's coming up. Alabama Week 5 against Mississippi State. We've already seen the Bulldogs play 4 football games, couple of wins to start the year against Southeastern Louisiana and Arizona, and then losses the last 2 weeks in conference play to LSU and South Carolina. Just what have you learned about this football team so far this year?
Well, we've learned that when they've been challenged, they have got a little ways to go, and I think that's been on both sides of the line of scrimmage. So the SEC does that to you, right? Teaches you a lot about yourself, teaches you a lot about where your shortcomings are because it's a league full of good teams who can expose them. I think what we found out at South Carolina this past Saturday is that State's offense is not as bad as it has appeared in games like Arizona and LSU, where it only managed to run 50 some odd plays. That was encouraging. It's something that State can build off of, I think, as it gets deeper into the season. What we're learning defensively is that there's still a long way to go, and it's a team that has had a rough time trying to contain good running quarterbacks. Jaden Daniels made a fair share of plays with his legs when LSU was here a couple weeks ago. Spencer Rattler made 2 really big plays using his legs in the South Carolina game this past Saturday. So it's a defense that's still trying to learn how to constrict the pocket and how not to give up those running lanes. You can do a lot of things right depending on how you defend a team. You can cover downfield well. You can do all of that. But if you lose contain, all of a sudden, none of that really matters anymore. So it's doing little things, doing them well, and doing them consistently. And State's still trying to figure out how to do that.
Going back to last year, it was so sad learning the news that Coach Leach had passed away after a great run in Starkville. Zach Arnett gets named the head coach. What were his first priorities immediately following Coach Leach passing away? And then how have you seen him kind of grow into this role now that we've got into the season?
The immediate priority was to keep the recruiting class together, and he did that. So mission accomplished there. And, he's a guy who is heavily involved in the recruiting process, so he had as much of an understanding of exactly what was at stake with regard to that maybe than anybody. So he absolutely did what he needed to do in the short term in December, immediately following Coach's passing. Beyond that, it was to kind of get the people in here who could help him have success as quickly as possible. And I think if you look at the makeup of his coaching staff, David Turner's been in the SEC for a long time. Will Friend's been in the SEC for a long time. Chad Bumpus, who coaches the wide receivers, is a guy who knows Mississippi State better than just about anybody because he played here and was one of the best wide receivers to ever play in the history of the program. So he was very intentional in identifying people who could help him not only understand the SEC and people who knew what it takes to win games in this conference, but he also wanted to find people who knew when Mississippi State was at its best, what the program was doing at those times that they could try to replicate or that they could go back and just simply implement into what they're doing either in training camp or what they've done as part of the practice routine weekly. If it was something related to travel, even something as specific as that, could they find a way to institute that again? So he tried to make sure he got the people around him right. And then, in terms of what the expectations are, in terms of what the very basic tenets of the program are, I don't think any of that has really changed. He's carried over a lot of what Coach Leach was trying to do with regard to playing with energy and effort and those things being non-negotiable, making sure that everyone's trying to do their job, their 1/11th of what they're supposed to do on the field, and that you keep this mentality of playing the next play, and you do all of those things over and over and over until the clock says 0-0-0. That was Coach Leach from day one. And of course, Coach Arnett was with him here from day one. And I don't think any of that has changed. I love talking to him. I do, because, here's a guy who just turned 37 not that long ago, earlier this month. And I joke that he's a 50-year-old football coach in a 37-year-old body. He is. He is very old school in the way that he approaches things. And in this league, I think that will serve him well. I really do.
And on Saturday night against South Carolina, like you mentioned, the offense started to get clicking. What led to some success for Will Rogers, also Tulu Griffin and Jaquavius Marks with the great performance that he had?
Well, offensive line protected better than it did against LSU. I think that's where it starts. Will Rogers had some time. It seemed like in the game against LSU a couple weeks ago, he'd get the ball in his hands and he'd have two guys staring him right in the face when he got it. And, obviously that's not a formula for success. But that offensive line bounced back, protected better, and did it with five in a lot of instances in that game this past Saturday. In terms of Will, I think when he's got time to operate and he doesn't have a couple guys in his lap right away, gives him time to go through the progression. And as he went through that progression, what he was able to find with Tulu Griffin is that South Carolina elected to try and play man-to-man against him in the middle of the field, and Will took advantage of that. So, Tulu is a guy that we've all known from day one that he arrived on campus, he could be an explosive playmaker. And it's exciting to get to see him realize some of that now as a wide receiver. We've seen it in special teams plenty, but we've not really seen it from him at the receiver position prior to the first 4 games of this year. And I would say in terms of how he started the year, he's been as good as anybody at the wide receiver position here in a long time. With the way that he's been able to get off to a quick start. So you hope that continues. But again, in the SEC, you're playing against some really athletic defensive backs. It's a little tougher to create separation sometimes. And if you get an opportunity to do that, it's kind of on two guys, right? Tulu's got to take advantage if he finds he's got a favorable matchup, and Will's got to find him. And they were able to get on the same page several times in that game this past Saturday.
Certainly did. Well, looking to the defensive side of the ball, who are some of the really dynamic playmakers we need to know about before this matchup?
Well, I think it starts with the two veteran linebackers. It starts with Buki Watson, who is an Alabama native from Maplesville, and then Jet Johnson from just up the road here in Tupelo in Mississippi. Both are 6th-year guys. They've played a lot of football here. They've been among the leading tacklers in the SEC each of the last 2 seasons, and they're right up there again at the start of this one. They just play with great effort. If you wanted people on your football team to mirror 2 guys, those are 2 good ones, because they just constantly find ways to make plays and get it done, and they do it with just pure energy and effort. On that defensive front, Jaden Crumity is a guy that a lot of people believe will be an NFL player. Had he not had a wrist injury that kept him on the shelf most of last year, a lot of people believe he'd be in the NFL right now. And Nathan Pickering is a guy who was a highly touted recruit several years ago, and we're really starting to see him now later in his career really understand how to play well in the center of that defensive line. I thought he had a fantastic game against South Carolina this past Saturday. Really did a nice job of creating push. He pushed a couple of South Carolina offensive linemen back into their running backs, and while he may not have tackled the guy himself, he certainly made sure to knock him off balance and get him off the ground. So I think that says a lot about the way that he's trying to play. And then at the back, Sean Preston had to miss the first half of the South Carolina game to serve a suspension for a targeting penalty against LSU. And all of us found out exactly how important his experience, along with Marcus Banks, who transferred over from Alabama a couple years ago, those two guys, because of their age and experience, make a difference when they are both on the field together. When State had to lean on some young people with Preston out of the game in the first half, there were some mistakes there, which are going to happen with young guys. But once Sean got back in the game, you could tell an instant difference. And again, he plays with a lot of energy, enthusiasm. He comes off the bench and immediately forces a fumble, and that's what you want to see out of those guys who get to play downhill a little bit at that safety spot. So those are a few that come to mind on defense that have been consistent playmakers so far.
Well, Neil, we're really looking forward to making the trip to Starkville for that 8 p.m. kickoff on Saturday. Just thank you so much for your time with us here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network, getting us ready on the Bulldogs. Look forward to seeing you. Thank you.
All right. See you, Roger.